We all know how the Second World War ended in Europe, with Allied forces surrounding Berlin and Hitler killing himself in his bunker before the entirety of the German army surrendered, stopping the spread of fascism throughout Europe and the rest of the world. But throughout much of the war, this end was anything but certain, and there was a real fear that Germany and the Axis powers couldn't be stopped. Luckily, Hitler was an ineffectual military leader, and much of Germany's failures on the battlefield can be traced to his poor decisions. But what would have happened if Germans had removed him early in World War II? The date is May 15, 1940, and World War II has erupted with unprecedented violence across the heart of Europe. For 8 months, British and French troops had largely held their defensive positions across France and Belgium during a period known as the Phony War. Despite the declaration of war by France and Britain on Germany, neither side had yet launched any major offensives, and only minor skirmishes had taken place between the two sides. Then, suddenly, with shocking ferocity, the German army ambushed the Allied forces by cutting through the thick Ardennes forest. Considered far too difficult terrain for large columns of tanks and vehicles, the move is a logistical miracle and a strategic coup for the Wehrmacht, which quickly flanks and splits the British and French forces in two. Hooking to the north, the Germans have caught the majority of Britain's expeditionary forces, over 300,000 men, between themselves and the North Sea. Disaster looms for Britain. A defeat of their own BEF will cripple Britain's military and see the single greatest loss of personnel by any power in centuries. Across the Channel, an armada of boats assembles, the British desperate to save their stranded forces along with 80,000 French forces. Naval vessels along with fishing vessels and even pleasure craft are recruited into the effort, creating an armada of over 800 ships to rescue the doomed soldiers. On the German side, German General Gerd von Rundstedt orders a halt to the offensive against the retreating British and French forces. His sub-commanders are in complete shock. They are days away from crushing the bulk of Britain's army and inflicting a mortal blow on the French forces. A halt here, just miles from Dunkirk, will allow the British and their allies to retreat to the safety of Britain. But Rundstedt is concerned that the marshy ground around Dunkirk will prove too difficult for his panzers, and despite objections from nearly all his sub-commanders, the order is given for the panzer assault to halt. The order is relayed to German High Command and directly to the desk of the Führer himself. Hitler agrees with Rundstedt's assessment and approves a halt to the offensive operation, against the protest of nearly all of his generals. An official approval of Rundstedt's halt order is dispatched via secretary to a wire operator, who prepares to transmit the order to the units out in the field. Suddenly, though, the operator, a young German officer, is escorted away from his workstation by German military police, and in 3 days' time he will find himself amongst the troops preparing for the assault into France's south. Confused by his swift and sudden change of posting, in his place is another young German officer, this one fiercely loyal to Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the Armed Forces High Command. The officer dispatches a modified version of Hitler's orders to Rundstedt, ordering him to continue with the assault. A day later, Hitler is furious to discover that his order has been botched, and the blame is laid on the new young wire officer. He is punished for his mistake by being stripped of rank and sent to the front, though secretly Field Marshal Keitel has already prepared to restore the officer's rank once he arrives at his new unit and is clear of Hitler's wrath. Hitler's increasing micromanaging of the war is grating on Keitel and the other senior officers' nerves, and with alarm, they're beginning to realize that the Führer considers himself a strategic genius who insists on running the war his own way. Yet, Hitler's own battlefield experience never went past trench warfare in World War I. He never even held his own command. In Dunkirk, the Luftwaffe savages the British, and despite the brief lull in the fighting, they are not able to construct key defensive positions that will buy time for the retreat. The panzers savage the British forces long before the rescue armada is able to sail away more than a few thousand to safety. The British Expeditionary Force and their French allies are crushed, with tens of thousands of casualties and over 200,000 taken prisoner. Historians consider the Dunkirk defeat the greatest military catastrophe in history. Back at the German High Command, Field Marshal Keitel holds a secret meeting with the other senior military commanders. They've successfully defeated the British forces at Dunkirk, but Hitler's order to halt the panzer divisions would have seen this major victory turned into a disastrously missed opportunity. The generals grow increasingly worried about the Führer's capacity to lead Germany's armed forces. Weeks later, France falls, with German troops triumphantly marching through the streets of Paris. The French government in exile in Britain joins its ally in calling for U.S. help. In America, Congress agrees to accelerate the production of war material to be shipped to Britain. and President Roosevelt dispatches William J. Donovan, a trusted confidant and World War I veteran, to Britain in order to assess Britain's ability to resist the Nazis. President Roosevelt and the American people on a whole are wary of joining another world war, and despite their close ties to Britain, there is little appetite for joining a war on the losing side and sacrificing hundreds of thousands of American lives. Donovan arrives in Britain, and despite the British Foreign Ministry's best efforts to paint the situation in a positive light, it's clear to the experienced soldier that the loss of the entire British Expeditionary Force has crippled Britain's military. Within 2 days of arrival, he sends a secret telegram to President Roosevelt, informing him that it's his personal assessment that the best Britain can do in its war against Germany is defend its home isles and use its mighty fleet to keep Germany landlocked on the mainland. Roosevelt agrees with the assessment and, in private sessions with Congress, informs U.S. lawmakers that he has no interest in declaring war against Germany. Material support to Britain will continue, but America is not willing to sacrifice its soldiers in a European war. German intelligence learns that America is not considering joining the war on the Allies' side and sends its own delegations to Washington. They implore America to cease its shipments of materials to Britain, which the U.S. refuses, but in a bid to maintain relations, they do agree to limit the total tonnage of goods shipped to their former ally. In exchange, Germany promises not to harass American shipping vessels. The joint American-German accord frees up naval vessels from the Atlantic, which quickly transition to the Pacific through the Panama Canal. While war has been raging in Europe, Japan has continued its aggressive campaign in China, and the United States is wary of Japan's ambitions in the Pacific. Japan knows that if it's to successfully grow its empire, it must quickly neutralize China and the Americans both. It's too small of a nation to wage a long-term war of attrition against the superior manufacturing might of the United States. Plans for a surprise attack on the American fleet at Pearl Harbor are considered, and then quickly scrapped when the fleet is reinforced by major elements from the Atlantic. America pushes Japan to cease its hostilities against the Chinese, but stops just short of declaring war. For their part, the Japanese largely ignore America's demands and continue to push Chinese forces south and west out of Manchuria. Having placed America on war footing, President Roosevelt dispatches large amounts of troops, planes, and ships to the Philippines in order to secure American interests. On a diplomatic visit, the Japanese ambassador assures President Roosevelt that Japan's ambitions are limited to China. Yet Roosevelt demands that Japan pull its forces out of China and cease its hostilities. In Europe, Germany has consolidated its hold on France and Belgium and launches an assault into Norway in order to seize vital iron mines and some other wartime industries in the country. Sweden remains neutral, and in secret negotiations, Finland agrees to support German offensives against the Soviet Union. With Britain's military crippled by the defeat at Dunkirk and America refusing to join the European war, Germany knows its position in France is secure. This frees up many divisions of infantry and panzers who all prepare to join Germany's Eastern Command for a massive assault against the Soviet Union. Prior to the start of the invasion, codenamed Operation Barbarossa, German ambassadors meet with President Roosevelt and present an offer by Hitler himself, a non-aggression pact. This pact is mutually beneficial to both sides. It will ensure that Germany not need fear a British-American invasion of France and will allow the US to concentrate on a single-front war against Japan to remove them from China. The deal is signed and publicly declared 3 days later, sinking British hopes that America will join the war on their side. With the declaration of the non-aggression pact between the US and Germany, Japan immediately launches a surprise attack against American forces in the Philippines, while the Carrier Strike Group launches a massive air raid against Pearl Harbor. With the buildup of American forces in the Pacific, though, the assault against the Philippines is easily repelled, and the surprise attack against Pearl Harbor is a disaster. Japanese aircraft manage to cripple and destroy several American battleships and destroyers, but the bulk of the fleet is already out on maneuvers and not in the harbor when the attack arrives. American submarines locate the Japanese carriers waiting for their air crews to return and savage the Carrier Strike Force, sinking 3 of the 6 carriers. Dozens of returning Japanese aircraft can't find room to land on the surviving carriers and crash land into the sea. The US officially declares war on Japan and immediately launches offensives against its Pacific holdings, while transferring hundreds of thousands of troops to mainland China. At the same time, Germany declares war on the Soviet Union, and the blistering German assault catches the Red Army completely by surprise. Finnish forces, eager to retake their territory lost in the Winter War of 1939, join in the assault and quickly reclaim all territory they were forced to cede to the Soviets. With France secured against invasion via the joint German-US non-aggression pact, contact, the bulk of Germany's forces are free to join in the assault against the Soviet Union. In the initial stages of the offensive, Hitler once more meddles with the strategies and plans of the German military high command. His command to begin the mass extermination of Europe's Jews has driven a deep rift between himself and Field Marshal Keitel, who has rallied most of the high command to his side. In a stunning move, the high command launches a coup and removes Hitler from power. The SS, under the command of Heinrich Himmler, launches an assault on army headquarters in Berlin. But Wehrmacht units, long wary of the SS, rush to the defense of the high command. In a brief battle lasting just a few hours, the SS contingent is defeated, and military police arrest Heinrich Himmler. Martial law is declared across Germany, and the Wehrmacht begins a campaign of police action against the fanatical SS loyalists remaining, leading to many firefights between the German army and surviving SS units. The state-sanctioned genocide of the Jewish and other marginalized people are stopped, and Hitler and Himmler are both placed on trial for incompetence and crimes against humanity, with their extermination camps built by the SS serving as key evidence against them both. In days, they are executed, and Germany begins to reform itself as a republic. By 1945, the German army has successfully conquered the eastern territories of Russia, and content to hold the richer areas of the Soviet Union, have forced a ceasefire on the crumbling Soviet Union. Germany now controls Europe from as far west as France to as far east as Kazakhstan. In the Pacific, the United States at last pushes Japan out of China, and with the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the war in the Pacific comes to an end. The year is now 2019, and the world is very different from the one we know today. The German Republic continues to control the majority of mainland Europe. An alliance of vassal states that includes Britain and Spain forms the bulk of a German-led alliance known as the European Union. In the Pacific, the Philippines, Australia, Japan, and China form the backbone of the Pacific Treaty Organization, led by the United States of America. The removal of Hitler in the early stages of World War II has allowed a German republic to flourish following their conquest of Europe. And with the collapse of communism and the remnants of the Soviet Union, the world never experienced a Cold War. International treaties limit the number of nuclear weapons amongst the 2 global superpowers, Germany and the United States, to only 700 active warheads. Of course, it's impossible to know how World War II would have played out had Hitler been removed, but there's a good chance that many of the worst atrocities of the war would not have been allowed to continue had he and his Nazi cronies not been in power. But how do you think World War II would have gone if Hitler had not controlled Germany for so long? Let us know in the comments, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great content.